All right, today we're taking a look at the top 15 players in fantasy football. Before we begin, I gotta ask you, have you started drafting Kaimani Vidal in best ball? Because I was plugging this kid about a month ago when his ADP was over 180, and now he's up to 160 today. His ADP is flying, and if you're looking for the next Puka Nacua, this kid has that potential. His combine was fantastic. He's entering an excellent situation with Harbaugh, and people are starting to catch on. So all I'm saying is, if you haven't started picking up a little bit of Kaimani Vidal here and there, you might want to start. All right, so we're looking at the top 15 players in fantasy football. This is not necessarily my rankings. I think there's some players who have a great chance to get into top 10 spots at their respective positions. Calvin Ridley, Christian Watson, Alvin Kamara, but they're going all the way in the 60s and 70s, so you're not going to prioritize early round picks on them because you don't need to reach for them like that. But this is how I think you should view the top 15 in fantasy football. Now, it is so important to never be married to the rankings as they are right now. I was looking up what the rankings were at this point last year for best ball, and Austin Eckler was going 4th overall. He finished RB 27th. Tony Pollard was going 15th overall. He finished RB 19. Chris Olave was going 14th overall. He finished wide receiver 24. T. Higgins was going 21st overall. He finished wide receiver 46. And then vice versa, CeeDee Lamb was going all the way 13th overall, and he finished as the wide receiver 1. So you can't be married to the rankings because flat out, there's a number of players who aren't going to live up to their ADP. Whether for injury or not, sometimes it's just straight up, they just don't have a good year. So these are my top 15 prioritized players. Now, I'm not going to go away from Christian McCaffrey and CeeDee Lamb with picks 1 and 2. I think that's irresponsible. The statistics, obviously, there's a good chance that one of them will not end up either RB1 or wide receiver 1, but there's nothing to suggest any sort of decline for them. Christian McCaffrey still looks as though he's poised to have tons of volume coming his way. Exact same for CeeDee Lamb, maybe even more targets coming his way. So nothing to suggest that they are fade candidates. The only thing I would suggest is if you're picking up Christian McCaffrey with that first overall pick, handcuff Isaac Guerendo with your 19th or 20th round pick, because that kid had an excellent combine and he looks to be the one to step in should anything, God forbid, happen to Christian McCaffrey. All right, where I differ from the rankings starts at pick 3. Currently, Tyreek Hill is going 3rd overall, but I'm going to put Jamar Chase 3rd overall right here for a number of reasons. Number one, he was missing Joe Burrow for a portion of last year, so we can expect a little bit more continuity with his normal starting quarterback in there. And they also drafted Amarius Mims, so Joe Burrow's going to have a little extra time here and there, which allows Chase to extend those routes, get further downfield, and gives Joe Burrow more time all around. Now, they drafted Jermaine Burton, but ironically, I think this helps Jamar Chase because he's just enough of a player to keep defenses honest. He's going to slide right into that Tyler Boyd role where they're not as comfortable focusing so much on Jamar Chase, and they do have to recognize that there's a triple threat on offense, as there always has been with the Bengals. So I think that plays into Jamar Chase's advantage. Also worth noting, odds makers currently have Jamar Chase with the second best odds of leading the NFL in receiving yards. So he could very well be in line for a big season. And lastly, we got to look at the Bengals defense. They lost Jesse Bates. Now, that is a huge loss right there. Their defense moves through two-time All-Pro Jesse Bates, who was also the play caller for them. So there is a small chance that the Bengals could start trailing somewhat often in games. Maybe not often, but more than usual, which could also cater to Jamar Chase being a little bit more involved further on in the game. All right, next up, number 4, we got Tyreek Hill. Now, Tyreek Hill won my fantasy league for me last year, so I can't talk anything bad about him. Love Tyreek Hill. The reason that I moved him down just a little bit there is because I am a little bit worried about Tyreek Hill. He's always doing those backflips, and I feel like they're an accident waiting to happen. But what's a little bit more concerning is if you watched the latter half of the games last year, Tyreek Hill was leaving often to go get IVs for hydration due to muscle cramping. And I don't feel like that's the best sign for a now 30-year-old player. So I am a little bit concerned about if Tyreek Hill is going to be able to make it through the season. Again, God forbid. There's also the fact that they drafted Jalen Wright, and that running game that was so potent last year could just be even more potent this year with a three-headed monster approach. So I think he could see just a small dip in production, which is enough to separate him from Jamar Chase, in my opinion. Number 5, I have Bijan Robinson. Now, I think this kid is a legitimate candidate to be the RB1 of the league. We all know Arthur Smith, just like Arthur Smith didn't know how to use Kyle Pitts, didn't know how to use Bijan Robinson. He would do the stupidest things, and that's the only way to put it, the dumbest things, like that game where he got mad at Bijan randomly and just held him out. He would make emotional decisions as a coach. We are not going to see that with Raheem Morris, okay? Last year, Bijan averaged 12 carries a game. They have made it known that they want to up his production. Behind a pretty good offensive line, in a division that doesn't have the best run defenses, I'm bullish on Bijan this year. I think he is a solid candidate to be the RB1, which is why he's number 5 on my personal rankings right now. All right, number 6, I have Justin Jefferson, which he's going 6th overall currently in best ball drafts. There are minor concerns about who his quarterback is going to be, but regardless of who it is, I can see there being issues with being able to substantiate multiple wide receivers and make multiple wide receivers fantasy relevant. But we know that Justin Jefferson is going to be their number 1 guy. So I don't have any doubts whatsoever that he will be fantasy relevant and super efficient as always. And as a matter of fact, with the looming struggles that the Vikings are likely to face, they're probably going to be trailing in a lot of games, and that game script only bodes well for Justin Jefferson. So Justin Jefferson is number 6. Amon-Ra St. Brown is my number 7. Okay, Amon-Ra is a fantastic receiver. I am just mildly worried about the emergence of Jahmyr Gibbs, because Jahmyr Gibbs really came on in the latter half of the season. Funny enough, if you look at David Montgomery's first 4 games of the season versus last 4 games of the season, it's so clear that they switched to Jahmyr Gibbs as the RB1. David Montgomery averaged 22 carries a game in the first 4 games, and by the last 4 games, he was only averaging 12 carries a game. So I think they're really going to want to get Jahmyr Gibbs involved, and we saw what a game changer he can be, and he could be the person that gives them those early leads, and then just they use him ad nauseum to run the clock out. But obviously, Amon-Ra is still going to be super effective, super involved. So he is at number 7 for me right now. Number 8. Now, this is a big jump. Garrett Wilson's currently going 11th overall in best ball drafts, but I have him at number 8 for a number of reasons. Number 1, his fantasy production last year was pretty good. And the only one thing that was a problem was that he only put up 3 touchdowns. That's such a low bar, and I think it's probably pretty safe to guess that he is going to eclipse that this year, especially if Aaron Rodgers is in there. We've seen Garrett Wilson play with so many quarterbacks over his short career. Terrible quarterbacks. Awful. And he's still managed to put up good games. So if you put Aaron Rodgers there, I think Garrett Wilson's in line for a huge year. Also worth noting that the defenses in that division are in some trouble, right? We know the Bills shipped off half their defense practically. The Dolphins got rid of Xavier Howard. The Patriots last year, their passing defense was actually pretty good. They were 10th overall in yards allowed. And I think that's owed to Bill Belichick, right? People hate on him because obviously he did very little when Brady left, but they still managed to have very effective defenses. So with him gone out of the picture, defensive mastermind that he is, the Pats are kind of ripe to be exploited, and Garrett Wilson could really, be the one to exploit them. Also worth noting that last year, Breece Hall had over 90 targets, and that was largely due to the quarterback circumstances. I don't think Breece Hall is going to see anywhere near 90 targets again. I think you could realistically probably subtract at least 30 of those, and a lot of those are going to go Garrett Wilson's way. So he's at number 8 for me. Number 9, another big jump. Saquon Barkley is currently going 14th overall in best ball drafts, but I have Saquon Barkley at number 9. He's playing behind arguably the best O-line that he's seen in his career. He's been brought in for goal line situations. He's been brought in for a number of reasons, but I think their plan is definitely to start using him more at the goal line. Take Jalen out of harm's way. I mean, if you go back and you look at the tush push, count how many times Jalen Hurts ends up under a pile of people, his leg stepped on, his shoulder, which he has injured before, taking a hit, his head taking hits. I think now that they've got big money invested into Jalen Hurts, they're going to want to protect him a little bit more. The tush push is not going to be anywhere near as relevant as it was, which is why they brought in an extremely effective goal line running back, which is Saquon Barkley, now playing in probably what's going to be the most dynamic offense we've ever seen him in. And worth noting, he stands to be a PPR monster as well. He's got some hands along with the rushing ability. So he's number 9 for me. Number 10, I have Jahmyr Gibbs. For some of the reasons that I mentioned before, Jahmyr Gibbs got off to a slow start last year just because they were easing him in. David Montgomery averaged 22 carries a game in the first 4 games, and by the end of it was pretty much phased out, and it became the Jahmyr Gibbs show, and David Montgomery went all the way down to just 12 carries a game. I think we're going to see that decline even more, which is why I think David Montgomery is an absolute fade candidate. He's currently going 70th overall. And I think even 70th overall is way too high for him. It's going to be the Jahmyr Gibbs show in Detroit. 11, I've got Marvin Harrison Jr. This kid he's built different. He's going to be a generational talent. And he's got just enough playmakers around him to keep the spotlight still on him, right? He's got Zay Jones now there. Michael Wilson's there. Trey McBride is emerging as well. So he's not going to be in an offense where he is solely targeted by defensive coordinators, but he's got a great opportunity to shine. Kyler Murray's a pretty darn good quarterback, has a good deep ball, and I think we're going to see a lot of Marvin Harrison Jr. this year. Number 12, I've got A.J. Brown. I've got him a little bit further back than the rankings. He's currently going at 10th in most best ball drafts, but I have him at 12th. Just because I think he's going to see a little drop in production with the new added weapon of Saquon Barkley. And he had a pretty weak second half of the season last year. There was a lot of drama going on. And he'll probably bounce back from it. But there's no denying that there was a decline in his play, especially in the last 4 or 5 games. Still at number 12, though, excellent touchdown target, and he's going to have his huge 30-point games, no doubt. So that makes him an excellent best ball candidate as well. Number 13, now this is the biggest jump of all. And I don't get why people sleep on this receiver. Mike Evans, arguably the most consistent wide receiver in fantasy football, in football in general. He holds the record for most 1,000-yard consecutive seasons. Mike Evans finished as the wide receiver 4 last year, and there's no big shakeup in that Bucs offense. They didn't bring in some superstar receiver. They've got the same running back, Rashad. They've got Baker. There doesn't look to be a lot of change in that Bucs offense. Cade Otton might be a little bit more involved, but Mike Evans has been the picture of consistency. I think with where he's going in best ball drafts at 25 is disrespectful, frankly. And I'm not even a Bucs fan. I hate the Bucs. But you can't deny Mike Evans is everything you could ask for in fantasy football. So rather than having him back at 25, I'm putting him all the way up at 13. Number 14, I have Jonathan Taylor. I have him a little bit higher as well. I think he enters a great situation where he's going to be used a ton, just as he always has. Last year when he was in, he averaged 17 carries a game. So that's impressive volume. Definitely RB1 material. And to finish it off, I have Breece Hall at 15. Now, Breece Hall, again, I've moved him back. He's currently going 8th overall in best ball projections, but I have him back at 15th because I think he is going to see substantially less targets this season, right? I think he almost benefited from Rodgers being out last season and a completely just deficient passing game. He had 95 targets last season. I don't think that's going to be replicated, and that's where he made a lot of his gains in receiving yards and PPR points. So moving Breece Hall back a little bit. His injuries are also very concerning as well, which is why I would recommend handcuffing another running back I plugged on this show. I was talking about Braylon Allen when he was at 206. He's up to 194 now. If you're drafting Breece Hall, you've got to handcuff this guy. Noticeable absence on this top 15 is Puka Nacua. I've said this before in videos. I don't think Puka is going to have as good of a year as he did last year. I think he's still going to be top 10 wide receiver. But last year, he really benefited when Cooper Kupp was off the field, right? We saw that first game where he got 20 targets. And when Cooper Kupp was off the field, Puka Nacua averaged 11.5 targets per game. When Kupp was on the field, it went all the way down to just 8.5 targets per game, which is the least of any wide receiver in top 25 fantasy, I believe. And worth noting, McVay has come out and said that Cooper Kupp was never anywhere near 100% last year. And if you watched him, you could see it. You know, he was coming off that year where he was the Triple Crown winner, one of only 4 in NFL history. So with Cooper Kupp being back to 100%, I think Cooper Kupp is being undervalued, and I think Puka Nacua is being undervalued. I frankly believe that he's going to be the 1B in their 1A, 1B relationship. So fading Puka Nacua. All right. If you enjoyed this video, do me a solid, help out, subscribe. We've got tons of prop information. We're going to be back with more fantasy, DFS, all through the off season and in the in season. Want to help you win your fantasy football league.